This is the new DM2 module from Knights of England. It can be operated as a standalone unit or as a unit connected to a serial bus input from a computer. In this first video, we're going to take a quick look at the functions that you can use as a standalone unit, which is completely compatible with the earlier KOE DM2 modules. Let's first of all apply power to the unit, and we can see that we're presented with a menu which allows us to select the operating mode. There are 4 possible operating modes which we can cycle through by pressing a button. We can look at a normal running mode, a show mode, an output test mode, or an input test mode. When the required mode is displayed, we press another button and go into that mode. So in normal running mode, we have a speedometer, which is currently receiving a simulated signal of a very high value so that we can see the trip meter clocking up. The speedometer itself is a 3-digit numeric display associated with a bar gauge display at the top. The trip meter is here, and at the bottom here we have an odometer measuring total miles. This unit's only just been programmed, so we have only 3 miles on it. This display here and this display here are displaying miles, and this is displaying miles per hour, but we can quickly switch between miles per hour and kilometers per hour at the push of a button. Now we're seeing the display in kilometers per hour and total kilometers, which is useful for customers in countries other than the US and the UK, where kilometers are the standard units. Now we have a little indicator here to indicate which units are being used. U represents UK and US, which is miles and miles per hour, and a C represents Canadian units or European units, which is kilometers per hour and total kilometers. This display here is normally used as a trip meter, but we can display a number of different functions which we can select by pressing a connected button on the outside of the unit. One press will give us a fuel display, which we can vary by changing a control on the test rig that we have hooked up to this. So that's showing fuel in gallons, and we also have that parameter being displayed on this bar gauge right here. If we want to change the units of fuel from gallons to litres, we just push and hold a button, and now we have the fuel display in litres. The calibration of these values is done very simply by connecting to a computer and just programming in the calibration values. We'll show that in a later video. So there we have fuel in litres. Then we push this external button again, and the display reverts to gallons. If we push the button again, we see an engine temperature, which again can be displayed in degrees Fahrenheit, or at the push of a button degrees Celsius. Another push of this button will give us supply voltage to the rig, to the unit in volts. We just use a U to represent volts because this is a 7-segment display which doesn't display any V very easily. Another push of this button will give us the option of inputting 3 more parameters which come from an external computer. So we're not hooked up to a computer in this video, we'll actually show those in a later video. And we have 3 possible external parameters. Another press of this button will give us a show mode display on here. Incidentally, as we'll see in a later video, any section of the display can be functional or connected as a show mode, so that if you have limited functions hooked up to the unit, you can just put those sections which aren't hooked up to real inputs into show mode. Another press of this will give us a direct display access mode. We'll talk about that in a later video as well, which actually enables us from the external computer to set or clear individual LEDs within the display. Another press of this button will put us back into trip meter mode. So you can see that we have, I've lost count actually, probably about 8 or 9 different functions that we can display on this trip meter. Another thing that we can do from user options set by the computer is have the leading zeros on each of these displays showing or blanked. At the moment we have all the leading zeros blanked, so 63 miles per hour will show us 63. If we didn't have lead zero blanking on, that would show us 063, and so forth. Each of these bar gauges can also be selected to one of the 6 or 7 functions that the numeric display can be shown as. At the moment we have them shown as fuel and temperature, but when we hook up to the computer we can change the display of those as well. Reset of the trip meter is done very easily by holding this button, and the trip meter is reset. All of these red-green indicators here are hooked up to real inputs, which we can change what's hooked up to those, or we can actually have these displays in show mode, as we've mentioned before. That pretty much covers normal running mode. In later videos we'll look at the other modes. I'll just show you one thing before we finish this video, which is how to change into show mode from normal running mode, which is to just press and hold. And at the moment we have, in show mode, we have a speed increasing from 0 to 255 and back down again. All these values and the speeds at which they change can be set by different user options within the software. At the moment we have a real-time clock running on the display in show mode, but those of you familiar with earlier versions of DM2 will know that we used to have a scrolling message there, which is going to be another option as well. You can put the scrolling message on there if you want. So toggling between normal mode and show mode is done simply by the push of a button. Back to normal running mode again. As easy as that. So in a later video we'll look at the other modes, which are output test mode and input test mode.